Violence, the use of force. It's a dangerous tool, a double-edged sword, if you will. If it's your preferred method of problem resolution, if you utilize it regularly, you're probably a bully. You're probably part of the problem. But if you are unwilling or unable to ever use force to solve a problem, if you simply refuse to embrace the possibility of violence, you may also be part of the problem, because you will be made a victim, at least certainly in jail or prison. And by being made a victim, you encourage the bullies to victimize both you and others. It's a difficult path to find a happy medium on. Too far one way and you're a bully, too far the other way and you're a victim. I made it through pretty much the entirety of my prison term, 17 years, without ever having to hurt anybody. And I was hurt a couple of times, but I guess that's the price you pay occasionally for not embracing violence to the degree that you could have. An occasion upon which I had to assert myself was early in my incarceration in county jail with another inmate named Dragon. I don't want to be throwing the mean terms, the insults around, but Dragon was obese, and he was stupid. He was slovenly, had poor hygiene, and he was mean. He was a bully. I didn't like Dragon from the first time I met him. Of course, the first time I met him, he was trying to punk me out of my dessert at dinner. I was eating my meal, and he walked up with a tiny little bindle of coffee. And he leaned in a little bit and went, "Hey, I want to trade my coffee for your dessert." And you have to understand, and this may be difficult to understand if you haven't been locked up, there's a barter system in place. Everything is worth something. A bit of coffee is worth X amount, dessert is worth X amount, everything from a piece of bread to stamps, there's a given value for them. And he was offering me a very poor deal. It was the equivalent of somebody offering to trade you their $1 bill for your $5 bill. It was intrinsically a poor deal, and in fact it was polite extortion is what it was. But since he was being polite and attempting to extort me, I was polite in my response. I told him, no, I'm good. I'd rather eat my dessert, thank you. Rather than walking away, politely accepting my refusal, he decided to be a bit of bully, to assert himself and try and punk me out of my food. There are various ways you can try to take something from somebody in prison. You can take it to 10. You can come up behind them and hit them nice and hard in the head, and then whenever they're on the ground, you can take their stuff. But there's diminishing returns there. I mean, how many times are you really going to hit somebody in the back of the head before you get a reputation and you end up getting taken down? You can be a little more circumspect. You can walk up on somebody and grab them by the scruff of the neck and, "Hey, you're going to give me your shit or I'm going to hurt you." That's probably has a better return on investment. You can do that regularly and probably get away with it for a long time. But Dragon was a coward. Most bullies are. And so what he did was he put his hand right next to my tray and leaned in, and, "I think you should trade your dessert for my coffee. It's a good deal." This isn't just about a dessert. Look, in reality, I'm perfectly willing to trade a piece of cake for a piece. Maybe that makes me a coward, I don't know, but I'd rather everything just be calm and happy. But that's not the deal he's offering. It's not going to be over. He'll be back the next day and the next day. The deal he's offering is that I be a victim and give him every dessert I have for as long as he knows me, and he won't use force against me. That's not a good deal. And so I asserted myself. I looked up at him and I said with a little bit of intensity in my voice, "You need to step back from me. You can't have my dessert." And again, bullies, cowards. So he did. He stepped back. He didn't want an actual physical confrontation, and I'm sure that would have been the end of it. Except as he returned to his tray, I noticed he already had an extra dessert and a bunch of extra food. Food was scarce in county jail. We were all hungry, so it was noticeable. I made a little mental note. The next day at dinner, I watched whenever Dragon sat down to see where he was getting his extra food. Sure enough, he had a little bindle of coffee, just like he'd offered me, and he went to another inmate named Phelis. And there was no intimidation, there was no bullying. He just gave Phelis the coffee, and Phelis gave him pretty much all of his food. His main course, his bread, his dessert. All he got to keep was his vegetables and a little bit of salad, some greens. I guess those are the things Dragon didn't want. I was not happy about this because I'd already noticed Phelis as being emaciated. He really looked as if he was in physical danger due to how thin he was. I'd assumed it was because he was a crack addict and had just come to jail. But now I realized, in fact, he'd been there a while and was losing weight because he was giving Dragon all of his food. It didn't sit well with me, and I decided to see what I could do. Later that evening, I saw Dragon, and I went over to him, and politely, "Hey, Dragon, can I get at you real quick?" And he was a little standoffish. Went, "Yeah, what do you want?" I told him, "Man, do you have to be trading coffee for Phelis's food? He looks hungry, man. Why don't you just let him eat?" And I had very little leg to stand on. I had no ground to approach him about this. It's not my business, and that's something you learn real quick in jail and prison is you mind your own business. You don't look for trouble. That's essentially what Dragon told me. He told me, "It's none of your business, man. Why don't you just leave us alone? I have a deal with him. I give him coffee, he gives me his food." I had few options. I could assert force. I could stand up and tell him, "Look, you're going to quit taking his food or there's going to be a problem." I didn't want to do that. That makes me the bully, right? On the other hand, I didn't want to watch Phelis starve before my very eyes either. I'm not sure how this situation would have resolved, except that an unusual circumstance occurred the next day. And I want to be clear about this. This was unusual. I don't think I ever saw something like this happen again while I was incarcerated, but a bunch of inmates had cleared out a cell and were play fighting in it, essentially. They were doing wrestling stuff, and they were sparring, and I'm sure that because these were violent felons, their version of sparring and play fighting was a lot rougher than what most people would think of. But they weren't trying to hurt each other. Somebody would go down and nobody was kicking him in the face or knocking him unconscious or anything like that. It was, help him up and, laugh about how fun it was. Dragon was one of the inmates doing the play fighting. At this time, and I suppose it's why Dragon had picked me as a potential victim in the first place, I looked small. I mean, I was tall. I was 6 feet tall. I've always been pretty tall, but I had not been eating well prior to my incarceration, and I was only 20 years old. I weighed probably 175 pounds. With my frame, 175 pounds at 6 feet is thin. So whenever I approached and went, "Hey guys, do you mind if I fight too?" There was a little bit of snickering. I think they figured that I wouldn't be able to handle myself, and it was a reasonable assumption, especially whenever I picked Dragon, who was pushing 300 pounds, I think, and yes, he was obese, but some of it's muscle, too. He's a big guy. I said, "Hey, Dragon, hey, come on, let's you and me." And he got a big, stupid grin on his face, and I think he made it clear that it wasn't going to be as polite of a fight as everybody else had had, because he told me, "I'm going to teach you a lesson." As it turned out, though, and you can't always tell this from looking at somebody, I was pretty quick. I was strong, too. So whenever he did the predictable, big, stupid guy fighting move where he put his arms out and ran at me real fast, I ducked under an arm, and I came around and got him in a chokehold and twisted, took him to the mat, and it was over quick. I put him in a scissor lock, and I started torquing his throat one direction and his spine the other, and I got right down in his ear, and I told him, "Tap, bitch, tap!" And he did. He was done. And I didn't push it any further. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I just wanted to make clear that I needed to be taken seriously as a man who could commit violence, I guess is the term we use. I didn't want to commit violence, but it had to be made clear that I had the potential for it. Everybody kind of laughed, and Dragon left quick. I think his feelings were hurt, and if we're being honest, I think his spine might have been hurt too. I did torque him a little harder than was polite given that it was a sparring match. And I even feel a little guilty about that. I hope I didn't actually hurt him, and I'm pretty certain I didn't, but I could have been kinder, I suppose. Next day, I saw Dragon off by himself, and I approached him. Went, hey, Dragon, and real calm, and hands up so that he doesn't think I'm starting problems with him. Can I get at you for a second, man? He was standoffish. He was working with feelings, is the term. He was upset, wanted to be upset with me about what had happened the day before. Put his weight on his back foot, and, yeah, what do you want? And I real polite, say, hey, look, I'm sorry, man. I just wanted to talk to you for a minute. Can we talk? Is it all right? I went, yeah, all right. What's up? What? I tell him, listen, I was thinking about it, and you're right. It's totally okay for you to be trading coffee to Feliz for his dessert. I shouldn't have gotten involved in that at all. This is what he wants to hear, so he's pretty amenable to hearing is, oh, well, yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely. I'm trading my coffee for his food. And I tell him, but, I noticed as he's really thin, and I was wondering if maybe you would trade for just his dessert. That way you could eat the part of the tray that you like, and you could look out for him and make sure that he gets to eat the rest of the food, and he'll be healthier and you'll feel good about it. And maybe it was the way that I approached him. Maybe it was the fact that I had made clear that I had the potential for violence. But Dragon was amenable. He thought about it for a minute and went, yeah, okay, we can do that. And from there on, Feliz, it really only took a day or two before it seemed like he was healthier, like he was gaining weight instead of losing it, even if he wasn't eating his dessert. Look, it's not like I fixed jail. I'm not saying, woo, I made everything better. In reality, I probably didn't even help Feliz that much. This was a little thing. But that's kind of the point, is that little things become big things. Little changes aren't little changes. They're step towards big changes. I made it so Feliz ate just a little bit more. Maybe he thought better after that. Maybe he didn't make so many bad choices. Maybe he got out of jail and lived a better life. I honestly consider it unlikely. He was a paint huffer and had severe brain damage, but maybe. And even that to the side, an environment where one less person is being victimized is an environment where fewer people will be victimized because it's not socially acceptable behavior. Or even that to the side, at least I didn't have to watch the guy starve. I didn't feel right about it, and I don't think anybody would have. So if you can make little changes, remember they're not little changes, they're big changes, or steps towards them at least. And it only takes so many little changes to avoid something like a jail term, a prison term, to avoid having your life ruined and having to be someplace where you watch people starve because they trade their food for coffee. It's a little change. Look for a little change. You'll feel better, and everyone around you will too.